Welcome back to Coffee and Cream, a podcast where we are changing the narrative one cup of coffee at a time. My name's Jake, and I'm here with Matt Bryant.
What is going on, my brother?
How you doing, man?
I'm a little tired.
Yeah, you've had a busy week and a busy day.
A busy day mostly, but yeah, rolling with we had a tailgate this morning.
Yeah.
So I've been up grilling and fixing food and getting ready for that since 7 a.m. So 7 to 3, man, basically a full time.
But you're an early riser though. You shouldn't be complaining.
I'm not complaining. I'm stating a fact and the truth. I'm tired.
Right.
But thankfully, I got some coffee right now flowing through my blood.
Amen.
I love coffee.
Amen.
But more importantly, I love Switch coffee.
Ooh. That's a transition.
I do.
If I ever saw one.
Yeah.
If I ever heard one, that's a transition. Guys, as you always know, we are sponsored by the wonderful, fabulous Switch Coffee. These guys are making a lot of headway here in St. Louis. They're opening up a shop. They got a coffee cart coming on the scene soon. You guys can check them out as switchcoffee.co. Use our promo code Coffee and Cream to get 10% off your next order.
I saw one of the Switch Coffee guys at our tailgate.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was in the neighborhood, so he came by and just started talking to people, chatting up. So
look at
they're
that.
real. They're real. They exist, people.
Yeah, they are real people. They're doing some incredible work here in St. Louis. We love them. I actually got this for myself. This is the Guatemalan blend.
Ooh, I was finna say, okay.
Fancy.
Yeah.
I think it was a limited time. Don't know if they have any more, but I probably should have checked that before I promoted it. That's fine. They had all their other coffee is fabulous.
Oh yeah, bro.
Let's check them out at switchcoffee.co. Also want to give a shout out to JM Films. If your business or organization needs video marketing that gets results, I don't know why I'm talking like that, but be sure to contact JM Films at jmfilms.com. Also, we're going to be having an interview today with the wonderful Eric Redmond, and that is brought to you by Crossway. Crossway at crossway.org. These guys are amazing. They have just a plethora of...
A what?
Plethora.
Plethora, okay.
It's like Zathura, but it's with a P.
I don't think people know what Zathura is.
It's a book. It's a children's book. It's a board game. I think it's a movie. Not a good movie, but it's a movie. They have a lot of a Zathura of gospel-centered resources. You can get all of your gospel-centered resources at crossway.org, including the ESV Study Bible, which is our go-to.
Yeah, bro.
The Elect Standard Version. So, Matt, why don't you open us up with a verse, our verse for the day.
Yeah, man. Our verses today are coming out of not Ephesians, 1 Peter chapter 3. I've been thinking about Ephesians a little bit lately. But 1 Peter chapter 3, particularly verses 14 and 15, which says this: "But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled, but in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy. Always being prepared," this is what we learn to focus on, "always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect, and having good conscience, so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ will be put to shame." I really want to focus on that idea of being ready to answer questions, answering questions. Here we love questions on this podcast, and God calls us to be prepared to answer questions, not just general questions, but questions about our faith. And so when we answer those questions, they are seeing that the hope is the gospel truth. That the gospel is the answer for any question that we have. It may be applied in different ways in different parts of life, but the gospel is the ultimate answer.
Amen.
And so I was thinking about these verses because today our guest, his book deals with a lot of questions, deals with important questions specifically towards African-American men. But I'm not going to spoil it. I want to introduce our guest today, Dr. Pastor Eric Redmond. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, sir. It's Matt and Jake. Thank you for welcoming me to the show today.
Absolutely, we are so excited to have you on. It's funny because we saw my my wife's in-laws today, last weekend, and my father-in-law actually he helps with the Iron Sharpens Iron conference, and he remembers that you gave a talk back in 2009 about these books, and he was like, "Oh, I think I know who that is." And I'm like, "All right."
Yeah, who's your father-in-law?
Todd Christian.
Okay, Todd, yes. And back in 2009, I did give talks on the book right after they came out. It was very gracious for him to invite me to be part of that conference.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a small world. It's a small world. But we're here to talk to you about your book. We're here to talk to you about a zathura of questions related to it. But first, let's introduce you to the audience. Kind of tell us who you are, your work, family, church, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm a professor at Moody Bible Institute, the world's greatest Bible college, and associate professor of adult education and training at Calvary Memorial Church in Oak Park, Illinois. We're a multicultural congregation in a western suburb of Chicago. And at both places, I focus on teaching through the Bible in order to equip adults and young adults to walk through the scriptures and grow in Christ likeness. My wife and I have been married 27 years. And we have 5 children ranging from ages 26 down to age 17. So we like to say that we're part-time empty nesters.
You're getting close.
We're getting really close. If we can just get that last one out, we'll be empty nesters.
That's awesome. Now we did notice that in your church's Why Oak Park section on the website, it talked about being a multi-ethnic, or as you put it, multicultural church. And so, is that a question about that? Was that just a natural happening, or was that part of like your mission or your vision of your church, or was it an emphasis in any kind of way?
That has been a natural happening because of Oak Park, Illinois. Oak Park was a community that back in the 70s was intentional about integrating in the suburbs of Chicago, where, as you know, Chicago is very ethnically divided in its neighborhoods. And so just being part of Oak Park with this ethnic diversity, the church is ethnically diverse, but we are making a push toward being a more integrated church, one that embraces everyone. And we've been having those discussions the last few years, and some things are really going well at the church because of that.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah, so what are some of your hobbies? You are a very qualified person to have on. You were a part of the council member for Gospel Coalition. You were a lead pastor over on the East Coast. So what are some of your passions other than just being a beast mode or whatever you're doing?
Well, I don't know. I don't know how many games of Scrabble my wife and I have going on our cell phones back and forth right now with one another. But that's one of the things that we're constantly doing today in our free moments with one another.
Yeah.
My wife and I, we like to bike sometime, and I've gotten into this long distance walking thing. We love going to the beach, travel when we can rub 2 nickels together and finally figure out if we can go somewhere. And then we like getting in our backyard and gardening, and my wife has got a squash plant bigger than, plants that eat people in movies. And yeah, feed me Seymour, that squash plant says back there all the time.
All right.
And of course, we spend a lot of time just things with our children, and that takes up a good portion of our time, even as they're adults, just trying to stay invested and tied into their lives. And then I'm really a Marvel movie fan. Nothing against plethora, but I'm just a Marvel movie kind of guy, and I grew up being a Daredevil comic book connoisseur. I have a humongous Daredevil comic book collection.
Okay.
So are you are you a big fan of the Netflix show then?
The Netflix show is okay. It's not the best. I don't like so much what they've done with Elektra in the show, but I'm more of a comic purist when it comes to stuff like that. And so, but I see what they're trying to do, and I understand that we entered a different day and age some years ago with comics. The superheroes used to be almost invincible unless someone came from 10 galaxies away, and now they got these things where they got boyfriends and girlfriends, and they weep and cry over things that Superman and Daredevil and Batman would never have thought about crying over in the comic books that I grew up reading. But anyway.
So you're one of those guys.
I'm sorry. I am. I don't need to see who Hawkman is dating. I'm sorry.
Yes. It's integral to the story, Eric. It's integral to the story.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, but going off of that, man, this is a coffee and cream podcast. So are you a big coffee drinker? Are there any coffee shops there in Oak Park you like going to?
Okay, so I qualify to be a coffee ally. I make coffee for my wife every morning, but I am not a coffee drinker. I'm a big tea drinker. I'm sorry, guys. I love black tea, especially English, British, or Irish breakfast tea or English afternoon tea. I put 7 or 8 Splendors, or unless I go to McDonald's and get it, and I get about 10 Splendors in it. No milk.
Okay. Eric, if you're not with us, you're against us, man. That's what that is.
Oh, no, but I read the elect standard version. Come on.
You're part of God's people. You're not part of my people. Okay.
Oh,
I love that. Oh my God.
This podcast is already
can I be like a righteous Gentile or something like that?
Yeah,
okay, we'll give it that.
Close enough.
Yeah. Hey,
Okay.
if Jesus stopped for you, we'll hang out with you, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, ride or die.
This podcast is already awesome already.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah, so bro, take it away, man. First questions.
Yeah, man. So we want to talk more particularly about your book, Where Are All the Brothers? Straight answers to men's questions about the church. And so for our people, can you give a brief summary of the book? Like, what's it about? What was your heart behind it?
The book is pastoral. It was written because I was trying to serve wives and moms in my congregation whose husbands and sons would not come to church. And I just wanted to know how come they won't come visit, they won't come sit in the pew.
Yeah.
I knew it was a gospel issue. And so I wanted to figure out a way to talk to these men. So the chapter started out as mini tracts to reach these men. I would write them a note and I'd put a little portion in and ask them to think about it. And one of them would show up at church and I'd ask him what he thought about what I said to him. And he'd say, yeah, I'd like that. And he'd come visit for a while. And then, another one, I'd write another bit and he'd come, I'd answer his question. And so they grew from a few paragraphs into chapters when the men began to respond positively to what was going on.
I didn't even know it was pastoral, man. Now that you said that, I think about it. I'm like, as I read it, it was very pastoral. Like I imagine myself on the other side of reading that. Like, okay, why would I be asking this question? Who am I talking? Like, who is he answering this question to? And just hearing your heart behind that, I think that's wonderful. So, like, it started out as this encouragement to wives and daughters in your church to really reach out to men and their families that are just refusing to come to church. And so,
yeah,
that is dope. And so, like, kind of building off of that, it's written in such a way as almost like a daily devotion, right? As I was reading it, like, it goes day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, and so on. And it seems to be reaching out to specifically African American men. Why did you take this approach of like almost like a daily devotion kind of set rather than just writing a book?
Well, Crosswell was really kind to me when I was writing the book. I said, look, can we be real about African American men in general and reading? A brother is not going to want to hold up a book if he's standing at the bus stop or if he's in the barbershop and be seen as a guy reading the book. So the book has to be something he can hide, that can slip into his back pocket and it's paperback and it can slide into the back pocket of a set of jeans. I wanted it to have a black cover, like a little black book, so it could look like a book where a guy kept numbers. But we couldn't do that, so they made it dark blue, and that was still fine. But I thought that it was important to write it as, if you just read just a little bit a day, you don't have to read a whole lot, because it's, generally speaking, it's a generalization and there are statistics to back it. African Americans as a whole are not big book buyers and thus are not known as readers. That doesn't make anybody less intelligent or anything, just statistically speaking, and African American men even less. So I wanted something, if it got into the hands of an African American man, he would actually read it because he only had a little bit to read a day, could put the book away, come back the next day.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, so kind of going off of that, so you recommend this book being read in kind of like any kind of setting, anywhere people find themselves. That's kind of the basics of where you want this book to be read, right? Anywhere, everywhere.
Anywhere, everywhere. I've had success when I drop a set in the barbershop, if in a black barbershop, which is also like a community meeting place, and they go like hotcakes in a barbershop setting. I've had other people tell me, I took your book to the barbershop, and as I was holding up, somebody said, "Can I read it?" And I ended up giving it away. And I have one chaplain in one state who told me when he took the book into his section of the jail, it went like hotcakes. He came back with 75. He said they all just went like crazy. And everybody was reading them. So anywhere, they're good to have.
Yeah, a little story is I bought the physical copy because I'm an anomaly amongst the statistics. I love books, I love physical books, and so I bought your book in order to get ready for this conversation. And I was reading, and it was really good. And so we started doing a manhood class for some guys that we work with in our church. And one of the guys was like, "Hey, I have these questions about Christianity. I don't know if it's for me. Like, I'm still searching, trying to find Jesus, the normal things." And he asked questions about the things that you wrote about, like roles of men in the church, Islam versus Christianity. And I automatically just pulled your book out and just like, bro, take this book. It's like, you just take it a little chunk at a time. And what you said about like him like looking at the days and like, oh yeah, I can handle this. You know, he looked, he's like, oh, this is it. Okay, good.
Yes.
Yeah, I could
that
definitely
was
do
the
this.
point.
Yeah. And so like, you're right. Like those things seem to go like real quick. I want to buy a bunch more to give away to some people I know. And so I think that is what stood out to me about the book, physically, like overall. But as I was getting into the questions, looking at them, I was looking at the 9. Look, you answered like 9 questions, or dealt with 9 arguments by African American men, why they may not be in church, against the church, maybe questioning the church. And your book was written back 10 years ago in 2008. But I think today, even specifically, those questions still carry a lot of weight, and I think even more so today that we need to answer them, especially with the church and the way it's going right now with racial tensions. So I want to talk to you about some of those questions that you dealt with, and it's like the first one was like on day 2, you wrote about answering the question of the authorship of the Bible. Why did you think it was important for you to answer that question or address that question specifically towards African American men, particularly?
Well, although African Americans as a whole are considered the most religious people in America, that's based on Barna polls and Gallup polls, meaning if they answer, 95% of them will say that they believe the Bible is the word of God. They have the highest regular church attendance, yada, yada, yada. Still, many men in our highly religious community will say to me, yeah, the Bible's okay, but it's just a book. The Quran is just as good or something like that. And so I felt it was important, if I'm going to have any arguments the rest of the way that I'm going to base on scripture, to address this issue in particular and say, you would trust the Bible if you thought it were true. Let me give you reasons why you can trust the Bible. It's not just written by man. It has claims and weight toward it being the very word of God. So we needed a baseline that we could all agree on, put that right at the beginning, and then let's go into the rest of our argument.
Yeah, that was good. I love that. And yeah, I think you answered that question in that book specifically really, really, really well. I think I kind of got that sense, like, you have to understand that this is the authority of God. Though written by man, this is God speaking to you, and laying that out as the foundation. And you answered several other questions right after that I thought were really, really important. But my personal favorite question, I'm going to get a little personal, is when you address in the book the question of Christianity not being for the black man. I thought that question, I think, is one that I think it's creeping up more and more. And you talked about, specifically in the book, the Nation of Islam. So I want to dive a little deeper into this question, specifically for our listeners. And so first, can you explain to the listeners who may not know or may have just a general view, what is the Nation of Islam?
The Nation of Islam is an offshoot of Islam that you would know from the Middle East that has historically had an association with black nationalism in the United States. People would be familiar with the names of leaders like Louis Farrakhan or Elijah Muhammad, even though they were not the founders. And it has a particular attraction to and recruitment toward African American men who would be angered by the racism in the United States, and who want a way that they could be religious and have great self-esteem and still be allowed to express their great anger over racist policies and practices in the country without taking the nonviolence approach.
That's interesting, yeah, because I think something that we're seeing a lot of as well is that the connection to a bigger picture is so important for people to feel like they're a part of a bigger story, a bigger movement towards the end of history. And I think that is a strong draw, not just for black men, but I think for all people, is that the ability to be part of a larger story. So can you kind of explain a little bit more the connection between why are things like black nationalism? I think we're seeing this more with Black Hebrew Israelites as well, as like, why is there such a draw? What makes that bigger picture so much more compelling for African Americans?
Well, in particular, in our nation, as the country continues to be polarized or experience more polarization, I would say, especially going into the 2016 elections, or the whole time while President Obama was in office, in somewhat as a reaction to him being in office, that people are trying to, as you say, find this identity in this larger meta-narrative. It's not enough to continue to be part of the meta-narrative that is inclusive of people of other races when you have a huge race problem, and not in the church when it seems like the church is not addressing the problem adequately, or for those in the Nation of Islam, not with enough force. And let me go back to this, what I'm saying about the non-nonviolent approach of Nation of Islam. Many years ago, in Washington, D.C., I used to live outside of Washington, D.C., there was a highly infested drug community, and, policing tried to get drugs out, and, churches, we did our thing, praying, et cetera, et cetera. The Nation of Islam came in, infiltrated the community, and those guys went in there with baseball bats, cleaned the drug dealers out. And see, that's something that we're not going to do as the church, because we're not going to use violence as a means. But they will say, following following Malcolm X, although they take this out of context, by any means necessary. That's their way of doing it. So that resonates with a lot of African Americans when they become tired of waiting and saying, I'm going to use a nonviolent approach. I'm going to protest quietly. I'm going to use politics. They don't want to do that. They want immediate results. And so they have this solidarity, and they say, if that's the way to do it, then I'll identify with Islam, even though it's not Islam as would be practiced in the East.
Yeah, I think you nailed on the head, man. It's this idea of seeing results. Like, I think even today we are longing to see results and steps towards racial or ethnic reconciliation or unity within the church and in the world. And so if we don't see it happening right away, you're going to be drawn to the thing that seemingly gets results. And
I think even that is a big part of our culture today, right now.
Yeah,
that's why you see so many rallies and protests and all these things happening, is that they want to see results. Right now on any and every issue. So I think that's maybe just a part of our cultural moment right now.
Yeah. And I think I read or heard somewhere that we have the attention span of a goldfish right now. And so, like, we can't sit and wait on anything. I was like, I can see that happening, though. We don't have the patience for those things right there. Yeah. And so here in St. Louis, we see not only Black Hebrew Israelites, but we see Kemetic beliefs starting to creep into the African American communities a little bit. They're attracting more and more African Americans, and so they have that quick draw. And so why is it important for the church, black, white, church global, why is it important for the church to be ready to answer this question about why Christianity is more than just a religion for black men, but it is a religion that is worth it,
Yeah, I think so. We don't live so far apart from one another that our lives don't cross in different communities. Yeah. And as believers, as even non-African American believers, are going to encounter African Americans at their works or at their children's basketball games, playing field, ballet, piano concerts, whatever, who are going to say, yeah, that Christianity, that's just for you. That's not for us. We have something else for African Americans. Post-Christmas, we'll celebrate our own unity, justice, etc. And the rest of the year, we've got, like you said, Kemetic beliefs or something like that. And so we need to be ready, African American, non-African American, to say, hey, I understand, why you might be interested in that religion. Can I explain to you the gospel and be able to explain it in a way that addresses the concerns that someone African American going into these other ethnocentric religions, the concerns that he or she might have that have led them there.
So, okay, I'm going to ask a follow-up question on that. I think that was really good, and you emphasized something really important, is addressing people's concerns, right? So what have been some of the concerns you've heard or seen that an African-American may bring up about Christianity?
Okay, so if let's say around this question, one of the issues that sometimes detracts away from Christianity and leads people toward Nation of Islam is the false belief that Christianity was founded in Europe and all of its historical figures are white. And we just know that's not so. Just opening the book of Acts, by the time we get to Acts 8, there is the Cushite queen in there, and the eunuch that's in there, and then by the time we get to 13, we have leaders in the church. We have Lucius and Niger that are in there, and we see people appearing in the gospel. So we know that's not so. We know there are historical people from Northern Africa that are part of the shaping of the early theology in Christianity, but this story is not known, and so when someone hears that, Christianity is for the white man, and then they see the paintings from the Reformation period and after that, and they read of theologians that largely came from Germany or continental theologians as the expression of Christianity, or even so, really for many, Rome, the Catholic Church, represents Christianity, and that's always headed by, up until recently, always headed by somebody that is of European descent. That leads people in that direction. And so we need to be ready to say, hey, can I address some of these concerns that are keeping you from giving a hearing to the gospel? That's all I was trying to do in the book, help people be able to address those things so a hearing for the gospel could be gained.
Yeah, I think that's great, and you've listed several of those people as well. I would maybe even add Augustine of Hippo to that as well. You have the Middle Eastern religion that spread through Africa, and that came from that Middle Eastern African roots, and that's super important to do that. But I think even today we're seeing maybe a lot of calls for churches, a lot of seminaries and schools to start including more diverse authorships into the curriculum. Do you, as a professor, do you see that as an important aspect of education? And how do you respond to the people who say you're just giving into identity politics, you're promoting intersectionality? How do you combat those things? How would you respond to those things?
I think it's very important to give exposure to the ideas of many. I don't want to be like those who have a low view of the Bible, who teach at other universities that are not Christian schools, that only look at things written by other people who have a low view of the Bible and call that scholarship, and dismiss anything from anyone who has a high view of the scriptures and say that's not scholarship. To me, that's not scholarship if you're not looking at it all and considering the truthfulness or the veracity or the weightiness of others just because they have a faith position. In the same way, I think we need to have exposure to the ideas of others. And even if I don't agree with a writer, school, the academy, is not a place that's just for indoctrination. It's for interacting with ideas. So I try to give my students exposure to as many writers of color and women writers as I can. The majority of my books, they are still written by white evangelicals, because that's who's done the majority of writing of the things that will go with what I'm presenting in class. But that doesn't mean there's nothing else that's out there. And I think the exposure helps people to see there are other people who are writing in this vein who don't just look like Euro white males in there. There are others. And then that helps the whole church, as we see it's not just one culture that is expressing Christianity. And then that also helps people outside the church to see the same thing.
I'm going to play a little devil's advocate on that a little bit. I don't do this. I rarely do this, so it's a rare thing. I can imagine.
You can just be Thanos today. Don't be Thanos. Just be Thanos.
Be Thanos. All right,
Snap, bro.
I'm playing Thanos today. Just all right. I think we're gonna be best friends, man. I'm just be honest with you. So I can hear some people may having a little pushback on that. The idea of including in Black or Asian or different ethnic authors and writers, and really bringing out that Christianity comes from different backgrounds. Not necessarily of like that's not true, but like why does that matter, right? Like, is this you're just propagating this further divide between Black and white? Why is it important for us to talk about Black authors or Black historical figures in the conversation about racism and why Christianity is for everyone? And so I feel like some people will be pushing back on that, thinking like it doesn't have that much weight. But what would you say to that a little bit?
Okay, so I'm going to talk from experience first. As pastor and previously as an associate pastor at churches, there have been books in the past that I have loved on Christology, on the subject of Jesus and study of Jesus' person, his deity, his humanity, and his works in history, looking at arguments for his existence in history, where he comes up in writings dating back all the way to the 2nd century, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
If the book cover has one of those classic pictures or portrayals of Jesus on it that makes him look European, in my previous African-American context, when I've handed that out, I have actually had someone turn the book and immediately give it back to me because of the cover, not even looking at the contents.
Wow.
Now, you might say that's very immature, but that person is associating an identity. If you have to give me a book that tries to portray the Son of God as white, but that's not what the contents are, that's just a cover, then I don't want to read it. Or can you ask the publisher to be more sensitive? I actually did write the publisher and say, hey, can you guys be more sensitive on this? I love this book, but I'm having people turning it away just because of the cover. So just in reality, in the experience, because again, we're so polarized and there's been so much hurt in the history of America, and I can't even speak in the whole world what happens on other continents. Sure. But here in America, there's a matter of sensitivity and saying, could you not identify what you believe is true with one culture, even by the cover of your book, or by always giving me authors of one stripe that seem to show they're the only ones who know how to speak truth, and we don't have anyone who can explain the truth of the scriptures to us, so we also can identify with that person. Yes, truth is truth.
Yeah.
And I highly believe that, and I'm not going to not read a book because it's written by somebody of a color when it's true. Yeah. I'm just trying to be sensitive and recognize we can address issues when we show that when it comes to those who are communicating the truth, especially at the highest levels, academia, there are people of all ethnic stripes who are doing this, and it's not just one community. That's good for the church and for people outside the church looking in.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So let's shift gears a little bit, because I think we're kind of heading in that direction. This book was obviously written 10 years ago, and I'm actually curious as to this question. Do you see any questions in your book that remain relevant today? Or do you see some questions that maybe you would have added into the book with the passage of time?
Okay, so in terms of adding, let me go there first before I answer the relevance question. I had people ask me when I spoke in the Caribbean one time, how come you didn't address the question of Rastafarianism? Well, Rastafarianism wasn't in my purview where I was outside of Washington, D.C., but the Nation of Islam was, whereas I've had other people say, hey, we have no idea who the Nation of Islam is. That's just not here in our cities. I probably would look at now the other offshoots of cults in the African American community that prey on the community, and either expand that chapter more or add chapters specifically for that. That's one thing I would do. But on the question of relevance, the longest chapter in the book, most of them are like 4 to 6 pages, but the appendix actually is the longest chapter where I address the issue of the African American church and its view of homosexuality. Yeah. That chapter, the truth is still the same, but I need to update it in light of Obergefell and what has happened in the country in the last 10 years, especially as there have become arguments among evangelicals for embracing same-sex relationships. And now we divided desire and intention from actual action. And there are those who are celibate, same-sex desire people. So I need to go back in and address all that, because that chapter probably seems a little insensitive to the climate now, the way that it's written. But all the other questions are still questions that I'm encountering. There's one more chapter I would add, though, and of course you guys know this, and that is there's a growing atheistic community rising among African Americans, which 10, 20, 30 years ago would have been unheard of.
That's right.
But but now they have an academician, Anthony Penn, leading the way for them. And of course they have Neil deGrasse Tyson also leading the way for them. So I need to put a chapter in on that.
Yeah.
Man, that is so helpful and so beneficial. I want to kind of push into this question a little bit more too. Are there future questions that we should be asking or thinking about now, not just about African American engagement in the church, but maybe about racial reconciliation generally?
There are. And this is not something that you could probably answer in one podcast, but at some point we just need to ask, why are we still here in 2018 with all of the great efforts that have been put forward so much in the church, and us preaching the gospel, and us trying to have things like gospel coalitions and MOK 50s and T4G addressing it, it being in so many writings, and the Promise Keepers movement try to do it. Why do we keep coming back here so that 20, 40 years from now, we're now still saying, oh man, we never dealt with the racial tensions in America in the church? We need to get some of our best minds on that. And then a way to talk again with sensitivity, yet with great clarity, on separating the quote unquote minority or oppressed people issues, in particular separating the affirming movement from the concerns that might be of ethnic minorities. You guys got that right? Of the affirming of the LBGT movement, and just why these are very different issues. We can't lump everybody under minority and oppressed.
Yes,
and how to talk about that so that we who are in the African American community don't have to say yes, and we're oppressed just like they're oppressed, and so we fight them. And hey, guys, what about the gospel?
I think we have our next book brewing right here. This is Why Are We Still Here? By Eric Redmond. I think that's the next book coming out.
Yeah. Now, you had mentioned a couple things, and I'm going to jump back a little bit. And I'm going to ask you to get your pastoral view on this, not just author view, but your pastoral view on it. And speaking about the black church specifically, you mentioned several issues: the LGBT, the rise of more atheistic thinking in the black community. Do you see one of those, or are these some of the biggest hurdles you've seen to ethnic racial reconciliation in the black church, or is there other like big hurdles to that? Because I feel like a lot of times in these podcasts and these conversations we're having, we're talking about the white church needs to do this, the white church needs to do this, the white church needs to step up. Are there things that the church, the black church specifically, or as I try to put it, the church with the darker skin tone, just happen to have the darker skin tone, are there things that we need to address, hurdles that we need to go over right now in order to move towards ethnic or racial reconciliation?
Absolutely. And I would try to frame it this way. So, by saying the white church always needs to do this, we can create fatigue among those who are trying, who are our brothers and sisters who are the white hue. But one of the things we always do is say, can you address the issues in your community? But here's something that we don't do, I don't feel we do enough of in the African American church, and I'm trying to be gospel and biblical here. There's nothing white or black about this. We need to say, as African American believers, you know what? We forgive. We forgive the ignorance and the displays of the past. And we're not going to embrace even the smallest bit of black nationalism in order to address the issue and lump all white Christians and all white people in this one big lump. We need to do that as African Americans and distinguish ourselves as African American believers from African American culture at large. And say, as believers, we are going to be the person who shows the mercy that we have been shown, and we are not going to choke our white brothers over a quarter like the man did in the parable of the unmerciful servant. We have to do that as African Americans, and we do not do that.
Come on. I'm done. I'm good. I'll see you later, Jake. All right. I'll see you later, Jake. I'm good.
Pass the plate. Here we go.
Oh my gosh, that was a mic drop moment I ever saw one. My gosh.
David, I'm sorry. I almost threw the microphone across the room with that one.
That was great. Man, wow. Okay, so let's follow up with that a little bit. So obviously this book was written in 2008. We are in 2018, probably a very different time, more polarized time than we were in 2008. We probably saw the beginnings of it in that time period. But as we're taking a look at the current ethnic and racial reconciliation conversations in the church, what do you see as some of the biggest hurdles that you see right now when it comes to addressing the issue of racial reconciliation?
We always need, as loud as possible, denunciation of the obvious, of white supremacy movements like Charlottesville or anything like that.
Yeah.
And the church needs to say something about that. We have to still be sensitive and be careful criticizing African American leaders, because there is a sense in which the African American community, hangs together, regardless of church or not church, because we got a cultural Christianity that goes on in there. The example I always like to give is, OJ, for most of his life, he could dish the African American community, but as soon as he became guilty and accused, he ran back to the community, and the community welcomed him right back.
That's right.
Said, hey, you're one of us.
Yep.
And so we have this big, you can't call my baby ugly thing going on in the African American community. Yeah. So we have to be careful in reserving our criticisms of African American community, least that get in the way of reconciliation and say, how dare you, point the finger at people in our community, because it's very easy for we who love the gospel even to retreat that way. I would say, look, as long as we keep listening to one another and not assuming we already have all the answers, and as long as we keep fighting against being fatigued, because historically African American church have been in this fight for more than 40, 60 years. It's been a few hundred years here going on, and so we can't get fatigued. Others can't get fatigued. But it can't be. Forgive me. I know some people might not like this, but it can't be everything, because the gospel, everything in the gospel is not about race.
Yeah,
it's not can't be the only issue.
Yeah. So is racial reconciliation a gospel issue?
It is a gospel issue for me because it's an issue of love. It's an issue of the second tablet of the law of loving your neighbor as yourself, and looking for opportunities to meet the greatest need of people across racial lines. My love should not be limited. If I'm loving people as I'm loving myself, that shouldn't be limited to someone of my own skin color.
Yeah.
I'm loving my neighbor. My neighbor in Jesus' parables and in Jesus' teaching and all throughout the Old Testament is someone even across a racial line. It could be poor alien widow. For Israel, it could have been a Gentile. It is anybody. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, it's a guy that's laying on the road beat up that people are passing by. And so I want to love all people and see that they are treated with dignity as people with the image of God, and that they are treated fairly, and that there are opportunities for them to grow toward their Creator in love and in goodness, the way I do in any community, the way I do in any country.
Yeah. Oh, bro, that's on point right there. I think you connected it with the act of love is very, very important. I think there's a debate going on right now in a lot of people's hearts, minds, and even probably like across the table is whether this is a gospel issue. And if the gospel calls us to love our neighbor is a different ethnic group, then we are called to love someone of a different race or ethnic group for the sake of them coming to Jesus Christ if they don't know him already. And I think that's a beautiful way to look at it. I just want to come back to your book a little bit. Do you think that your book right now, or how do you think your book right now can help engage in the racial tension, specifically within the church right now?
I like to say when people ask me to come speak on the book, especially in a predominantly white context, that African American men are one of the largest overlooked mission fields in all of North America. And what I put that shocking statement out there so that people will think about their dealings with African American men and how often, even as believers of all stripes, because of the way the media has portrayed African American men, we are hesitant or pull back from engaging in ways that would be fruitful toward gospel proclamation opportunities to African American men. So I have a burden and a passion here. I want to see African American men reach for Christ also. But I need other people to help me in the fray, and it can't just be limited to African American people, because we're not the only people who run across the lives of other African Americans or African American boys or African American young men. If you're a coach on a football team and you're white and you're Christian and you have African American boys there and their dads and moms understand, that's an opportunity. But how do you get past the hurdles? That's what the book is for. Get me past those hurdles. Help me talk to people there.
Bro, I'm about to weep right now, man. You like, for real, you just nailed my heart on the head of equipping people of different ethnic backgrounds to be able to connect with African American men, man. If it wasn't for guys and some of those authors and like Spurgeon and Martin Lloyd-Jones and people teaching that to me, and I grew up in a predominantly black church, but I was influenced by other Christians that were white speaking that truth into my life, I would not be a Christian today. It takes people investing in that, man. And I'm good. Like, I'm good. Like, that was perfect, bro. Like,
And sometimes it's not even a matter of courage. Sometimes it's just a matter of being equipped. How do I enter this conversation? Hey, I didn't grow up, if someone says I didn't grow up in the African American community around a lot of African American people, but I want to know what someone else is thinking. So when he addresses the issue, I can say, I understand that. Now let me get to the cross from there. Yeah. Again, that's what we're trying to do. Just give another resource that'll help get over the hurdle so that somebody can say, hey, I want to listen to you because you understand me.
Wow. That's powerful. That's helpful.
Yeah.
I want to push into this a little bit more as well. So alongside of your book, what are some other resources that you would recommend to equip not just black brothers and sisters on this issue, but what are some good resources that would help equip white brothers and sisters, including myself, in how do we address this issue?
Oh, bro, you didn't have to worry. I was going to include you.
Okay, cool. I'm next.
Carl Ellis's Free at Last. has probably become the book that sits on the shelf of
Yeah.
many African American evangelicals, right next to the Bible. If my book can even be on the same shelf, I'd just be glad. But I have encouraged so many people to read it because Ellis, being from an older generation, he also has a different perspective based on living through the 60s, and he takes a historical look at how to understand African American religion, so someone understands African American church and why someone can have the title of Rev and he looks more like a politician rather than being a preacher, and all those sorts of things that kind of make people say, I don't understand this. He helps us gain an understanding into that. And then if you get any book that explains the history of Christianity in Africa, and there are many titles that would do that, just reading that. But let me give you one secular book that we have found helpful in our discussions here in Chicago and recommended to many, and people have resonated with it, black, white, or other. And that is a book called The Warmth of Other Suns. And it looks at the migration of African Americans from the South to the North. It's an award-winning book. And I so many people have said, wow, that has really helped me to enter into the experience of African Americans and be more sensitive in there. And if I could just recommend one more, Wide Awake by Daniel Hill, I've enjoyed that also.
That's awesome. That's so good. First of all, I don't want this podcast to end. But we want to honor your time there. So just kind of wrapping up here, one of the things I loved about your book is at the end of each day or chapter, however you want to look at it, you had some practical steps, practical applications, even resources, just as you listed, for the reader to take away, to apply right off the bat. Like I think one chapter is like, I want you challenge them to go find a church, like at the end of one of your chapters, and I thought that was phenomenal. You challenge African American men who are wrestling with these things, go try it out. Like this is just an easy step for you to do. It's kind of hard in a sense, but it's also very, very easy. There's no deep. You have to read these 6 books before. I say no, go do it. I love that. I love practical applications. We love applications on this podcast. We try to do that at the end of every episode. And so for us, if you could give a practical step, practical application for us, our listeners, to take away in helping us engage in racial issues, what would that be?
Oh wow, boy, that's a big one.
You can give 3.
So if yeah, and I'm gonna have to make an assumption here. I'm gonna have to make an assumption that the vast majority of your listeners are within proximity of another believer of a different ethnicity. Okay. Go and sit, grab coffee, a dinner, or whatever, and say, "Hey, can you tell me if I have been insensitive towards you on the issue, or I don't understand here. I want to understand from your point of view why you feel this way on issues of race," and determine to have an ongoing conversation. We'll do coffee once a week or once every other week or whatever. And to listen. You all won't agree. In fact, in the beginning, you might say, "Why are you asking me that?" Or "I don't want to go there." But it's so important to begin having conversations and to listen. And at the end, whatever happens, to pray with one another. Then come back and do it again. It takes that sort of effort on an individual level, not just, okay, we're preaching and the congregation, please get this in general. No, each person now go out and practice this. Go and have a conversation with somebody across an ethnic line. And I'm speaking to the African Americans listening also. Please go do it.
Yes.
Do that and have conversations, because the responsibility is not for whites only. It's not for Hispanics only. It's for everyone.
Yes. Yes. That is.
I think we're all in agreement here. That was so good. Well,
yeah. Okay. So when are you guys going to have me back on the podcast to discuss, the next Marvel movie? I mean, you got to have me on after Captain Marvel comes out. We have to talk about it.
I mean, Captain Marvel. Yeah. Well, I think we'll probably do another podcast once Avengers Part 2.
Yeah, and all the racial issues within that.
Oh boy. Yeah. Is Infinity War Part 2 racist?
I'm not going to lie to you. I think Avengers Infinity War, the first one, has been one of the best examples of racial and cross-cultural, cross-ethnic lines of fighting against the enemy together. I think it has been.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you.
I agree.
Yeah, it's like I was sitting Jake like the little scene where Captain America and Black Panther are running towards all the monsters coming in.
Yes, and Black Panther is just a hair ahead of him, but they're both way out ahead of everyone else. Yes.
See, I said that to him. I said, Jake, this is us fighting against racism. Like, let's just go right now.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I that movie to me, like I watched that scene just over and over again, just started crying. Not because it wasn't just like this awesome epic scene, but like you have two different worlds having one enemy. And that scenario was the monsters. For us, it's sin, and not just racial sin, but sin in general, and us fighting together against those things, man. I think we spend so much time fighting each other than actually fighting against what is really the enemy, and just. Yeah, that movie. I just saw all the racial connection. I was like, why can't the church be like Marvel? Like,
right.
But
it's so good. So before we wrap up, do you have any last words for our listeners? Practical applications? Any other closing words for this conversation?
Again. Just a word of thanks. Thank you all for having me on again so much. I would encourage any people, if you get the book, to give it away. Give it to somebody on a college campus. Give it to someone you see on the bus. Give it to somebody in the hospital or someone who is doing work in an incarceration facility. And just say, hey, would you read this and let's have a conversation. But in terms of racial reconciliation, again, I'm highly going to push that you figure out a way to have individual conversations across the line and have the courage, pray for God to give you the courage to do it and the humility to listen. That will do more to deal with issues of racial reconciliation in the church, I think, than anything else other than prayer and God just pouring out his mercy and response.
Amen. Also, watch Avengers.
Watch Avengers. Watch Black Panther.
Get it in. Oh, my gosh. So, guys, you can pick up a copy of Where Are All the Brothers at Crossway or wherever books are sold. Buy it, read it for yourself, and then just immediately give it away because that's the purpose of the book, and we absolutely love that. So, guys, be sure and leave us an honest 5-star review on iTunes. Let us know what you think. Head on over to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for updates. Let us know who you want us to have on next. We're always looking for guest recommendations. We have some pretty awesome guests coming up. Eric Redmond was awesome, and we have some more awesome people coming on the show to talk about these issues. We want to give a huge shout out to our sponsors, Crossway, JM Films, and Switch Coffee. This episode was produced by Nick Francis and was mixed by the marvelous David Butler. So, guys, that is it. Oh, before we go, Eric, if people want to get in contact with you, where do they go?
They can find me on Moody's website by putting in Eric Redmond, Moody Bible Institute, or Eric Redmond, CalvaryMemorialChurch.com. They can go to my blog, A Man for Issachar, or they can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all sorts of places. Eric C. Redmond is usually how I go.
Awesome. Boom. There you go. All right. That will be it for this episode of Coffee and Cream, guys. We will see you next time.